Welcome to the Upside Podcast, powered by Upside Global and hosted by Julian Blinn, founder and CEO of Upside Global. The Upside Podcast is listened to weekly by over 6,000 sports and tech executives from all sports leagues and teams in the United States and around the world. Julian has been developing technologies for professional sports teams for over 10 years and has worked for major tech companies along with sports tech startups. In each episode, Julian interviews global leaders in sports to share knowledge on emerging technology in the sports industry and how these technologies can help improve the performance of individuals and organizations, both on and off the playing field. And now here's your host, Julian Blinn.
So today we have the honor of interviewing a group of sports performance experts in pro tennis. So guys, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Julian.
It's great to have you back. So I'll make some quick introduction just for the audience so they know who you are. But first we have Dirk Spits, the National Physical Performance Manager of Tennis Australia. So welcome back, Dirk. And then we have Al Murphy, the Senior Strength and Conditioning Coach and Head of Sports Science at Tennis Australia. So welcome back as well, Al. And then we have Zack Evenden, an experienced performance coach that worked with top tennis players like Frances Tiafoe. So guys, again, welcome back to the show. So there's a couple of topics I want to cover today. The first is about women's tennis and genre-specific research. So our first question to you guys is, are we seeing more tailored training, recovery, injury prevention approaches from women's athletes, and where is the research still lacking? For example, in research towards women, I think it's less than, I'd say 9% of all the research today. So there's clearly a lack of research when it comes to women's team or women's athletes. So what is your guys' take on that?
I can go first if you want. From the research perspective, absolutely, there's still gaps in literature, not just in tennis, it's just sport and exercise science in general. But it's something in tennis we're cognizant of. We try where we can to have studies look at both genders, or at least factor in that within the analysis. So we'll try, because we are a sport or a federation which has both genders across the whole pathway. So where possible, we'll always try to have both groups. But in tennis, I guess there's big differences from a training perspective, technically and tactically, but which makes the outcomes of research different, but also the interventions we try to have within the athletes different. Some things like the game style, the shape of the ball, the height of the ball going over the net can be generally lower, faster in the women's game, where the men will shape the ball over the net a lot higher and deeper. So kind of means some of the ball speeds are faster and less time to react. So from a movement perspective, they may be trying to hold the court so they can be in position more balanced as much as possible. So the movement patterns may be slightly different to the male game. And then that feeds into some of the strength and power work that they're doing. Generally, there's a lower strength profile than the men's game, male players, which can then lead to different ways that they deal with forces in movement, but also forces within technique. So, and that might start early within our junior pathway of where, again, the relative strength profiles are lower, that they are dealing with the heavy racket to make the timing of hitting the ball and the serve, for example, at the right time. The junior players will just do whatever they can to make contact to win the point and to get the serve in. So sometimes we are working with different techniques that have evolved over their junior pathway from a strength issue. So from a training perspective, we can try to increase that relative strength, but also then try to work with what techniques they've developed over their pathway.
No, good point. Now, quick follow-up question on that. So I know, for example, in women's team, right, soccer team, they're using some apps to track menstrual cycles, right, for women's athletes. Is that a common thing in tennis? Do you guys do they track menstrual cycles to know when is the right best time to, to train? And is that a common thing or no?
It's generally individual basis, I'd say. Some are, some aren't. It's not something that, as a federation, we have a program or protocols in place for that. Some of the working groups that are kicking off at the moment are looking at questionnaires across the whole pathway from coaches to players in terms of what education the playing groups think they would like, which menstrual cycle and a range of other female topics feature in. But generally, in terms of training around different parts of the cycle, within tennis, because of the random schedule, you don't know which day you're playing, you don't know what time you're going to be playing, makes it tricky to kind of plan that out, and also deal with it on a match day that you can't have any option to not train or not play your match that day.
But for example, blood analysis, if your player is overtraining, undertraining, that's been also used, I suppose, for women's athletes in tennis players, correct? I'm guessing, but maybe we're getting into the weeds now, but yeah.
Yeah, we haven't investigated that. It's more, in terms of just individualized, if the athletes are interested, how we can help them along education profiles.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you, Al. Dirk or Zach, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Zach. That's all right on the back of Al's stuff. Obviously, working together. I agree. There still needs to be more research, and we're conducting some good research here in tennis, and obviously we need more. An important part Al made is education amongst the coaches, and how we train females. That's down to communication style, the motivation, body image, confidence. Obviously, we've got menstrual cycle considerations and REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sport, which is not just females, it's male and females.
Mm-hmm.
And that's replaced the older athletic amenorrhea, and that's something that we need to be across. Women can often face some cultural behavioural barriers as well, such as misconceptions around strength training and not wanting to look like a man. So there's a few things that we need to work around. I think in all of this, and when the research comes out, we still need to treat the athlete as an individual, male or female. So we need comprehensive needs analysis of, and not just focus on assumed limitations such as age, training history, lifestyle, and preferences. So that all needs to be taken into account. I've trained some females that, display characteristics both psychologically and physiologically that are more male inclined. Hence, I can push them harder, I can do lower reps. I mean, traditionally with females, you're not going to do the 1 to 3 rep ranges. They don't respond. Females have greater ability to recover, especially from aerobic exercise. So all those things come into play from an exercise prescription, but you still got to treat the individual as an individual.
Yeah, well, great points. Thank you, Dirk. Zach, any thoughts? I know you trained some female athletes as well, right? Female players.
Yeah. It was tough. They didn't let me push them too much. So I was in the low rep range with those two. But no, like I agree when it comes to everyone's different, and you can push some harder than others. Everyone comes with their own history and differences in game styles and the way that they play, and sometimes it's just tough to what we see they need. They just no, that's not for me, and they hide behind their beliefs and they block themselves in a lot of ways. That's what I've experienced just from my standpoint. Obviously, it's from a less research or less technical, because also they would also say, we want the trainer to do our fitness, but when you're on the road, you don't have a trainer unless you got the money to pay for a trainer. So, it's everyone wants their own custom program, all the time, but not everyone can afford it as well. So it does get a little bit technical.
Yeah. Now, if I ask you guys, what do you think is the toughest, or was the toughest? You know what I'm saying? Was the toughest female tennis player of all time, the strongest one?
Of
People,
all time.
Serena Williams was. I don't know, but what do you think was the strongest?
It's hard to say Serena wasn't.
You're right. Yeah.
It's hard.
When she wanted to take on a man's tennis player, right? The match didn't happen, but do you think she could have got a chance, or just no way?
No, I think it did happen, no? Or she played a set or something like that. And she was world number one at the time, and I think she lost 6-1.
Yeah.
Wow.
It could have been 6-2. I'm not sure.
We'll have to see whether Kyrgios gets through a whole set before getting injured with Sabalenka.
I think he could be broken and still come away 6-1, 6-2 max. Like, I think his wrist could be shot and he's still cruising through that set. I don't think it's going to be close.
Do you guys remember who Serena played? Who did Serena play? I forgot.
It was apparently a guy 700 or 900 in the world.
Really?
Yeah. And she was world number one at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then she lost 6-1.
Or 6-2. One of those two. It was on the low end.
Okay. Well, that's I forgot. I almost forgot. I thought it didn't. It never happened. But interesting. So, the next topic I want to ask you guys is about longevity and aging athletes, right? So, if you look at, for example, Djokovic, right? How old is he? Like 37, something like towards the end of the 30s, right? So, with players competing effectively into their late 30s and even 40s, what adjustments in training load, recovery, nutrition are proving most impactful for extending careers today? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in and go first on that one. I think it's been the old saying, train smarter, not harder. It's not to say that these older athletes don't train hard. For me, it's pushing the boundaries on how to keep them on court and be available to train, as opposed to being worried about driving performance metrics. So you really need to have a close relationship with the older players to monitor and have some good comms on what's working, what isn't. And I feel like they're a bit more sensitive to change. So I take intensity over volume, and often, a bit of a rule I govern by is not to do consecutive days of multiple sessions in the one day. On court, I can obviously do a tennis session in the morning and then a strength in the afternoon. Body management, some people term it injury prevention. I think injury prevention is sitting around waiting to get injured. We call it body management, different approach. And that's our big approach with recovery and performance nutrition for those older players.
People used to say injury prevention, but you cannot prevent injuries, right?
No.
So
that's exactly, that's why we call it body management. This is going to keep you on court, so it's doing something every day, and the volumes and intensities, that body management does change, but there's a big push for mobility and listening to your body and looking after your body, and if that requires greater mobility because you've had a long haul flight, then that's what you're doing, and greater recovery at the end of the session. So that's how I've found success with those older players.
Makes sense. Well, thank you, Dirk. Zach or Al, any thoughts on that, longevity?
You want to go first, Al?
Yeah, okay. I guess the follow on from even the last topic when Dirk was saying it's still got to be very individualized. So some of the older players can be more robust than some of our younger players. So it's still within that is still individualizing what the loads they can handle, nutrition, recovery that works for them, like Dirk said there, absolutely. One, I guess I'm a big advocate that I wish I'd known a bit more as a junior coach, been around the notion of joint health and joint longevity. So I guess have found some of the big prescriber now of the functional range conditioning kind of theory around strength through range of motion, particular focus on what the joints health is. in particular the older athletes I work with, setting them up with even theories that they can keep going after they've finished, that they know what their joints can handle, what the sport has done to their joints, because they've probably changed over time from a bony perspective. So what we have to do ongoing because of the sport that they've decided to play for their whole life. What that means ongoing from a strength, from a range of motion, from a physiological perspective. So I think that framework really fits well within tennis, I've found. And even the newer internal strength modeling around being specific with the inputs of what type of strength, what type of intensity, what type of stimulus you're giving, what tissue. I think it's maximizing the time, particularly Dirk said at that later stages where the volume, we generally have a lot of volume problems. So being really specific with the adaptation you're trying to drive, with being specific with the stimulus you give the athlete, and then you can kind of deal with less volume issues. But even I wish I'd known that early in my career again, to start with some of the junior players, so that we can deal with some range of motion, some strength, some volume issues earlier on, than wait for those bony changes, those maladaptations later in their career that might even stop them playing as long as they want to. We can kind of address those earlier in their career.
Now, on that, you mentioned measuring like range of motion, joint. I mean, do you know of any tools that can help? I don't even know the answer to that, but to measure the health of the joint, and is that getting worse? Or, I mean, do you know of anything that you can capture that, or no? Or just looking at just by your observation, I guess.
Pretty multi-factor, I'd say. We probably look at it in Tennis Australia as more of a team effort between the physio team and the strength and conditioning team, and the medical space. So whether that's testing strength through different ranges, isometric strength at different positions using valve force frame, for example, force dynamo type work for isometric profiling, but just range of motion, maybe through some of the exercises we prescribe, through some of the mobility work we do with the physio team in the gym, and if needed, with then any imaging that may come from an injury, investigating, okay, what might be the cause of that from a structural perspective, or has there been a change from the last time they had their hip scan for another issue? What kind of changes have happened?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you. Zach, any thoughts on that? Longevity?
For me, it would be like, like Alan Dirk said, like individualized it goes without saying. From my experience, I've just seen and heard, players talk about how they change their diet over time. I had a player who got injured quite a lot, and whenever he got sick or would feel like his injury is coming back and flaring up. Now he dealt with injuries terribly, so this was a repetitive thing, and a full cycle. But then he would turn green. It's like he went plant-based when a problem would start to arise, and he had, so he believed it would make everything better, right? So he started feeling better. He would tell me, "Yeah, I just feel better," and it's probably half mental. But if mental is half of the battle anyway. Schedule could be adjusted. I remember seeing Federer back in 2018, and just the amount of work he was getting done on the table was just crazy. He was living on the table. I remember me and Frances played in Basel, and we never saw him practice, we never saw him hit, but we always saw him on the table. Like it was just, he just lived in there.
He wasn't training much, you mean? He wasn't training much, you mean? Or?
Well, no, he was, but like it wasn't so much about training. It was more about prepping the body and making the body feel right, and having the body ready to fire when it was ready. That's what I thought anyway. And another coach, I spoke with Mike Russell, Taylor Fritz's coach, and He worked with me and Francis for a short time, and he was, adamant about soft tissue. And he was someone who played quite late played on till quite late in his career, and he was known for being one of the fittest guys on tour. So I think that was a big thing. I think also athletes have started mixing up how they train and hit cardio. Like, Rafa would hit the elliptical and the cross trainer quite a lot.
Yeah.
I know other players with kind of like knee problems, or if they just don't want to run, then they'll go and try and get it a different way on the elliptical and cross trainer. Those from my experience is how things start to change once you get into the latter stages of your career.
And you talked about changing the diet. I mean, it's well documented, right? Djokovic had some food allergies or whatever, and then he found an expert and say, "Oh, you gotta go was it a plant-based diet or something?
Gluten-free and plant-based."
Yeah.
Obviously, Novak's probably just turning over every single stone out there.
Yeah.
But I think you would either go gluten-free or you would go plant-based, because it's also impossible to do this at tournaments if you're not like, if you're not top 30 or something, like you're not really forking out, beyond dining, or, if you're in Pune or something like that in India, like, it's going to be tough to follow your diet. So you have to also figure out what is feasible and accessible on the road.
Yeah, because you can
it's a good point, Zach. Like we talk about anti-inflammatory diets, which is not necessarily gluten-free, but for some, and as you get older, we've destroyed our gut over a period of years. Things react differently. So again, it's listening to the player needs to listen to their body, and the convenience of processed foods is a big one. So if it doesn't come out of a packet and you can get it and eat it, then that's obviously preferable. But there's times where that's just not attainable, traveling in airports and on planes and everything else, that you need to be able to do that and make the right food choices.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's tough to because you travel different country, different culture, different types of food, right? So how do you deal with that, right? So you can always accommodate. Hey, the next question is about travel, right? Jet lag, scheduling. I mean, the tennis is very intense, right? I mean, you travel all the time. So given the relentless global calendar, how are teams, right, athletes using sleep science, circadian rhythm, tools, or even wearable data, right, to minimize the impact of jet lag and travel fatigue on performance? I mean, it must be really hard, right? And we talked about this like before, like you say you do a night session, you go back to your hotel very late, or you're going to jump to another time zone the next day after tournament. I mean, how do they deal with that? Do they even, do you get even accustomed to it, or just deal with it?
I think every player is different. Every player is very different in how they react. Most players will prioritize sleep. Most players will, prioritize getting back out there quickly so that they can have the next day, the next rest of the day. It depends kind of what your priorities are as well as a person, for your mental. I think we spoke in one of the podcasts we did about Murray and Berrettini at the Australian Open, and Murray coming back and being the first one back at site. That just speaks to Murray's mental, professionalism and who he is as a person. Like Frances would never do that. You probably wouldn't see Frances at the site the next day. So it's just very, very different, with that. And then, I've had players that will, look for certain flights, get in at a certain time, try as much as they can to catch the night flight. When they get there, do some mobility, go do a workout. Some go straight to the courts. It depends what your preference is really, and how much you want to go through your whole checklist, and what your order of priority is, and getting ready and recovering.
So have you seen play? I think you're the one, right, Zach, who told me like there was Felix, right? I think he's very notorious for kind of taking naps before games or something. I think you mentioned that. I mean, have you also work with players that are they're having trouble sleeping? They don't do well when they go back late to the hotel. They're jet lagged. Yes?
Big time. And ultimately that's something you got to like get over and figure out how to manage, and just you need to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because there's say, oh yeah, I had a bad night's sleep, and I'm supposed to say, oh, okay, well, just go out there and try your best. Like, that's not happening. We got a match, life goes on, this next player is coming to beat you, and you have to turn up, unfortunately. So it's tough. Obviously, you try and work with them as much as possible, and you'll try and custom things as much as possible to accommodate if there is a problem like a sleep issue and something like that. I've had some players who say, I get less than 10, 11 hours sleep, I'm going to have a terrible day. And I'm like, that's
pretty good, right?
That's nuts. And I'm like, listen, if you've been able to get 10 plus hours sleep for your whole life, then mate, hats off to you. But it's unrealistic. And, you have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's from my point of view anyway.
I mean, they get paid a lot of money too, right? Also to make big bucks. So if you can't, so well, I don't feel like playing today, or I need some more sleep. I mean, come on, right?
Yeah. And that just goes to like, how mentally tough are you as well? Like, can you be uncomfortable? Can you get uncomfortable? And if your training doesn't dip you in that uncomfortable, area, or if you're constantly just, I feel like I'm done today, then you're going to really struggle in those areas.
No, great points. Thank you, Zach. Ad or Dirk, any feedback on that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in. I definitely agree with Zach there. I think some of the, not just jet lag, it's the after matches at night where the adrenaline's pumping for so long that they'll struggle to sleep for that night. So it's how they can learn to deal with that, because you might play tomorrow. It's not always the Grand Slams where you have a day off. You may be on again tomorrow if you've won. So it's learning how they deal with that. It's kind of contradictory, but like the older they are, they're more experienced at the travel. They're more experienced with the pressures, but they probably aren't as easy to handle it as the younger players, where lack of sleep might not as, they might, just because they're young, bounce back pretty good the next day, whereas it might take the flights, long haul flights particularly, might take it more out of the older athletes, even though they're more experienced of how to deal with it. So there's the to and fro there. For us, I guess, as Australians flying across to Europe, to the States, it's a big deal. It's just a long haul flight. So the mobility work, the preparation of trying to get ready for that flight, and then on the flight, and then once they land, so that the body can move properly, so the joints are working, so that they're not jumping straight into a intense on-court or physical situation that the body is not in its state that's ready to handle that. So those things are really important, and more important the older they are. Other things, other tools, I'll try to advocate for some of the jet lag travel apps, so that it can start to think when they know what day they're traveling, or if it's after a training block or end of Aussie swing, you're going to be heading over to the States. All right, what day are you going to leave? Maybe you can start, if you've got some training days, start adjusting to that time zone earlier, or what time to be awake on the plane, what time to sleep on the plane. So doing whatever you can to adjust the circadian rhythm ahead of time, so when you land, you're not so totally out of whack, because obviously Australia to US, it's almost the opposite time zone. So things we can do ahead of time, just to minimize the impact. Some of the wearables, though, again, individuals will wear individual tools that they like. Like as a federation, we don't advocate for one over the other, but just again, what they like, what works for them. Hopefully, the more successful they are, they can lie horizontal for some of those long haul flights than in economy seats. But it's different for every individual.
Now, have you guys used like, well, I mean, I showed you the red light device, but like the red light therapy devices to make you sleep, and like the one that stimulates like the natural melatonin. Have you guys used that before? Or no. No. So there's this one company I tried before. They have like a small red light. It only stays on for like maybe 20 minutes, something like that. But it's a red light that stimulates your natural melatonin. So you put it on your bedside table, and it's a red light, but it stimulates your natural melatonin, so you fall asleep hopefully easier, right? So things that I've seen also used myself is like those sleeping mask, using pulses of lights and sound, makes you fall asleep too. So I was just curious if you guys have tried any of those, but
yeah, I think there's, as you're alluding to, Julian, like sleep hygiene. So there's calm or meditation apps that are out there, curtains closed, so there's no light coming through. We've used nutritional products such as tart cherry juice, which is high in melatonin, which is naturally produced in the body and helps you sleep, but it's a high antioxidant as well, especially after a night match where the adrenaline's still flowing. Try and limit screen time, at least 45 minutes to an hour before bedtime, those type of things. I think, as Zack alluded to, really good comment was, these players are never going to be 100%. So it's almost, you don't have time to get jet lagged. So let's expose you to a bit of training adversity. On an individual level, work out whether they're a morning person or not. If they're not a morning person, let's not schedule an 8 a.m. training if you have the time. But then there's times where, you're first on, you've got to get in there at, 6:37, do your prep and have your warm up hit at 8 o'clock. So that means you shouldn't be going to bed at 11 or 12 if you can handle it. As Al also alluded to, some sleep monitoring devices are great, but I've also found there's some players that get really anxious around those metrics. I haven't got my 8.5 hours sleep, so I'm not going to play well. It's like, everyone's different. I can live off 6 hours sleep and I'm fine. Others need their 8 or 9, but realizing you might not always get it. The key is, the hydration, the mobility. If you are on long haul flights, getting into sessions, and those sessions should be of lighter duration and intensity in the first few days, and really get on top of your hydration and nutrition to try and get any after effects or accumulative effects of that long haul flight and get it out sooner rather than later.
I just wanted to add one thing. Al said, obviously players struggle to sleep, and then obviously Dirk just said limiting the screen time. That's a big thing, because when we were out there in Australia too, it's a nightmare, because then you got to think about where home is. So let's say you're in Japan and you're doing well, you got a big win. Then now when you're trying to get to sleep, everyone's waking up, Googling, seeing that you got the big win, and your phone is blowing up like hotcakes. And you can't come down from that adrenaline high. You want to enjoy it too. So you have to get to these tournaments and just have routines preset that you just dive straight into. Obviously second, third, fourth year around at the same place, exactly where you're going to go, how long it's going to be, how long the tournament responds, and you kind of make mental notes of how each tournament operates and where you can go. And then you got to get ahead of, okay, he's just finished his match, it's 10 o'clock, I need to have the sushi ready for when he gets out the shower, and then I've got to already go and have that physio booked, and I've got to go speak to someone ASAP, because if we end up missing a time, we're screwed. And then then you got to either stay and stick around, which messes up, and now that's got you frustrated, or you have to skip it, right? And neither one is a win. So you have to be very on the ball with it. I've traveled with Frances solo, so I've had to do the jobs that Al and Dirk would do, and you got to be on it. The second that match finishes, you let him know he's got 10 minutes to get in the shower, then he's got to finish that food, then he's got to be on the table in 20 minutes, and it's very clockwork. If you're if you're in it for the long haul, and if you're in it to try and maximize and be as professional as possible, then yeah, it's got to be pre-med. You've got to have that plan, and obviously it won't go to plan, but you got to have it.
Now, quick question on what you guys all said. Have there been experiences where you had a player, you didn't sleep much, but somehow you had a pretty good game, right? Like, how did you pull that off? I mean, have you seen occasions like that when you didn't get much sleep and somehow maybe with the adrenaline, they managed to play very well?
Yeah, heaps of times, and we've had players that haven't had days off in over a month because they weren't supposed to qualify. They've qualified, then they've gone deep in that tournament, and then they've had to drive throughout the night to cross states to then reach the qualifying in the next tournament, and had just a month on a heater. And I think you find ways around it. You get them up, whether it be joking around. You activate them through different strength modalities, and changing their warm up, changing their focus away from them feeling tired. And when you're winning, I think that trumps everything, makes it a lot easier. And as Al alluded to, the older athletes, it's easy to do that. Some of the younger athletes spend that much time on the court because they're getting caught up in that, especially the slams, the high level tournaments, to stay there and book later massage and be around the dining hall and chat to everyone, whereas you just want them to get home and start their evening prep to wind down. So there's a lot of occasions where you can actually use metrics in a good way to say, I know you're not feeling great, I know you're feeling tired, but we haven't lost any strength, we haven't lost any power. Your heart rate variability is good, or what have you. So you can start to use those metrics for good, but there's plenty of occasions where you can sit there and go, they've been successful.
Yeah, no, great point.
Yeah, there's many, and I'm sure that's not. I'm sure they've seen it in so many different forms as well. Like, one of the one that struck me the most was after Australia, when me and Francis made quarters. His wrist was like, he had never played that many 5-set matches in a row. So his wrist took a beating. We didn't even warm up for the Rafa match for the quarterfinals because he couldn't pick up a racket. And afterwards, we literally were recovering all the way until Miami. And it was still a problem at Miami. So 3 months or 2 months later. So then now we're really starting to worry about it. We're starting to try to tape it up in all sorts of ways. And ultimately, like, we just tried too many things, and I was like, we're not going to find the answer looking for the answer. And and he was still able to play, he was still able to push himself. So then I'm like really questioning this whole injury, and it's tough because you want to like listen to them, but you also want to just get them just to kind of like shake it off and just kind of play through it, because it could be more mental, it could just turn mental then. Anyway, so Francis played Kecmanovic first round at Miami Open. The crazy thing was he was playing unreal. He beat everyone in practice. Nishikori, Cilic, Lucas Poi was actually unreal at the time before he got injured. And then he took a beating in practice to someone, and all of a sudden the injury's back, right? And it's the day before he plays Kecmanovic. We go on and it's 6-7, 7-6, 7-6. He full body cramps. He cannot walk to the net to shake hands, right? So we actually have to get him stretchered off the court. We had to carry him off the court, carry him into the locker room. It's like all hands on deck. Everyone's freaking out. Physio at the time, it's second week with us. It's second tournament. Brett Waltz, very good physio. And he goes, man, what the hell are we going to do? He's done. Like, he's done. There's just no way out of this one. And I said, you know what? I think we're fine. I think we're absolutely fine. I think now his body can relax. He got another win finally again. It's a tough one. Sometimes, for me, what I found is you need to go through them crazy long battles where it's not about tennis. It's just about saying no and seeing the match through and getting it done. And once you get it done, it's like this whole weight comes off your shoulders. And it's like he went out there and we ended up making quarters, and that was first round. We ended up beating some top players in that tournament. I can't remember who, I'm going blank right now, but put it this way, the injury, we never spoke about it again after that night. and things got 10 times worse than what they were the day before. So, you know, winning, you know, as Dirk said, winning solves everything, you know, ultimately.
Yeah, you know, I was doing a podcast with some NFL guys, and they were saying, so yeah, winning is great, but sometimes you don't see the imperfections or the issues. And when you start losing, then you're like, oh my God, you know, we don't look at those things, right?
Catalog comes out.
So it's coming out. Yeah. Hey, last question for you guys is, it's more of a personal question, but what is the hardest part of what you guys do, your job, and what is sometimes maybe misunderstood from the general public about what you guys do? Any thoughts?
I got one. Yeah, for sure. I think maybe it's no, I don't think it's an Australian problem. It's the travel. It's the time away from your family. Like, we love what we do. It's helping others achieve their dreams, but it comes at a trade-off. So I think that's definitely the toughest part. It's being away from home, and probably it ties into what people don't necessarily know. It's trying to convince my wife this as well. We don't see a lot of places you go. You're actually not there to go sightseeing.
It's not a honeymoon. It's not a honeymoon.
Not always the sexy trips to the nice countries and cities around the world. You're at the hotel, you're at the courts, and you may be lucky to get a day off. So that's for me, getting away from home.
And what's the longest, how many months you've been away from home without seeing your family? 6 months, 1 month?
I've been lucky in terms of nothing close to 6 months. Maybe back when I was a bit younger, I could have been up to 3. I know some of the coaches and some of the S&C coaches I work with, they're 6 months, 8 months, some. So
Long time. Well, thank you, Zach or Dirk. Any thoughts on that?
I think. Go on.
Yeah, you guys, Zach, go for it.
I completely agree 100%. And it's the travel. It's ultimately it's a nightmare. And like, it's funny because you'll get texts from people that say, "Oh, where are you off to now?" Like, like one, we get to pick where we go. Like, we're flying first class. Half of our seats are booked middle. It's a nightmare, to be honest. It's not like you're booking a flight, way in advance and you pick your window seat and your aisle out the gate. Like, you get second fiddle to everything. And, you don't get to bring your family. You don't get, even if your family's there, how many hours of the day you seeing them. It's tough. When I worked with Francis in 2018, that was my first year with him, and that was his big year jumping up the rankings. I was home maybe 6 weeks of the year. For the whole year, I was just with him. But it was also my role as well. Yeah. It was kind of more of a day-to-day, assistant role, how it started out, and that was the price, and it was non-negotiable. It wasn't even like a discussion. It was just like, okay, I'm going home now for a couple of weeks, I'll book your flight to come with me. It's not like I go home, you go home. It's even when he was resting, I had to still monitor so much. He still needed someone on him, and at the time, that was my job. So
price you gotta pay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zach. Dirk, any thoughts on that as well?
Toughest? Yeah, pretty much the same. However, just to add to that, in my role, trying to manage a lot of staff and a lot of players in different time zones around the world. Whereas I don't just have to look after a number of players, there's a lot of staff, and then the voices of a player's team. So partners, managers, beyond the coach, randoms that turn up who've got, a nano patch that think it's going to solve everything. And then meeting them in the hotel lobby, and all of a sudden, they've watched Game Changers, and they're full vegetarian diet. So little things like that. Things you don't know. Probably we spend, everyone always comes up and says, geez, you must be fit because, you're putting your tennis players through fitness sessions and this and that. Yeah, I'm fit because I do that in my own time. I spend most of my time behind a computer planning and putting those sessions into place. So it's probably one thing that people don't realize is a lot of it is sitting down behind a computer. You are there to coach the player through a session, not to actually run with them and do the session with them. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't think about that, but yeah. But hey, guys, we are at the end of the podcast. But thanks again for your time today. Always insightful to have you guys. So thank you.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Al. Thanks, Julian.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening. To access past episodes and other research, articles, and analysis of sports technology, please visit our website, theupside.us. Subscribe to the Upside newsletter and receive full access to our sports tech business letter and website. Royalty-free music is provided by ibaudio.com. The Upside podcast provides timely insights and interviews with global leaders in sports technology. Until next time, keep looking to the upside.